That's good.
Okay. All right, so in order to add a SIP trunk to an account, you first create the trunk and then you add lines, but you do all that within the same wizard. So you're not having to create the trunk, then leave and go somewhere else and add lines to it. So from an existing account that you want to add a SIP trunk to, then from this group services menu, it would normally be collapsed like this. So you would open it and select SIP trunk. And then that's going to take you inside the SIP trunk wizard. Then from there, you give your trunk a name. So we'll do today's
Would
date.
it, Amanda, would it be appropriate to give it the actual customer name, or should we use member set number? What do you think?
Traditionally, I've seen it be named the same as the customer. Now, if you have a situation where you are adding more than one trunk, then I've seen it where it's the customer's name with maybe an additional number or like trunk A, trunk B, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So, but the naming convention is completely up to you all. We don't care what you name it. All right, and then your next field is the subscriber delivery method. Now, from us to you, it will always be a SIP trunk, but from your equipment to the customer, or from the equipment that's dispatched out there, could essentially convert that SIP trunk over into a PRI. So at least from the order entry process, not much changes. We just give you this field so that way if someone comes into the system and they look at this trunk, they can see, oh, we're delivering that to the end user as a SIP trunk, or we're delivering that to the end user as a PRI.
Okay.
There is one additional field when you select, or a few additional fields when you select PRI. Let my system catch up with me here. There we go. All right. So when you select PRI, this field here, SIP talk path, is added, and SIP selection order. So you would put, now traditionally a PRI only has 23, so you would put 23 there, and in your number of ports, you would also put 23. And then there's this SIP selection order field where you can choose the order in which calls flow in and out of that particular PRI.
Amanda, if somebody wanted a partial PRI, let's say they already had a partial PRI and we're replacing it, could I put 15 lines or 10 lines or whatever?
Sure.
All right.
So, and then when we go back to SIP trunk or SIP for that subscriber delivery method, those fields go away. So for your office, is that going, we're delivering it to you as a SIP trunk, but is that Digium equipment changing it into a PRI?
No, we can take either one, and we're going to do we're going to use stick trunk because we want more than 23 lines.
Got it. Okay, so this is what we're about to go through. This is how you would need to key that SIP trunk into the system when you all are ready.
Does it always have to be enhanced trunk type?
Yes, in order to get the meta switch in that switch drop down, it does.
Okay.
So after you've indicated that subscriber delivery method, that's when you would come over to trunk type and you would choose enhanced to be able to choose that meta switch. And then from there, you would select a SIP package. We're going to use the test package for today's demonstration, but you would have the packages associated with what you offer your end users for SIP trunks in this dropdown, as far as with your pricing to your customer. So that could automatically be applied by choosing that package. And then you would enter your number of ports. And Jeffrey, you can enter in how many ever you want. You can even come back,
Okay.
say you need more, then you can come back in and increase that number.
Later on?
Later on. Mm-hmm.
Nifty. All right.
And then for the gateway device, you're going to choose generic SIP gateway because you could use any type of equipment, or the type of equipment could vary. You could have Cisco call managers. You could have AdTran devices, the 908s and 908Es, but this doesn't limit you on equipment from when it comes to delivering a SIP trunk to a customer. They may have their own equipment that they want to use, and so this way you can just choose generic. It doesn't affect the provisioning of that SIP trunk on the meta switch in any way.
Okay.
Then from there, your authentication is always going to default to yes. We always want that authentication to take place. Now, the username can be anything. It can be a 10-digit phone number. It can be words, whatever. We're going to do a Murray for my username, and then I'm just going to enter in a password. Now, that's the username and password for the lines to register with the switch and for the equipment to register with the switch for the SIP trunk.
Do we make up the password ourselves?
You do. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then if you ever feel like there's a mismatch, or you're not really sure what that password may be, you can always come into the system and reset that password. And that's going to update it at the switch level, and then you or that customer's vendor can then go inside that equipment and make that password change also.
Okay.
Okay. So next we're going to enter in the remote IP. That's the IP that will be from the equipment that will be registering from our switch, whatever IP that's going to be placed on. We're just going to use this one for the training purpose. And then the switch IP is always this one. You're not going to have to pick through a list of IPs. It'll always be that.
Wait, what? Explain the remote IP again, please.
This is the IP from which the equipment is going to be attempting to register with our switch.
So it would be their static IP we assign them.
Yes.
All right. All right, assigned by us.
Correct.
And so it has to be static. It can't be DHCP.
No, it has to be static.
All right. So we have to sell them a static IP address for them to have a SIP trunk. Okay.
Okay.
Far out.
All right, and then for the remote port, in my experience, that's always 5060, which is also the switch port. So, and then you do have the ability here to enable line traffic study. That's just for a report that's in CrossSoft. But if you don't want that, then you don't have to have that. And then there is the ability to enable account level packages for SIP trunks also. Say, for example, you sell a customer a SIP trunk and you're going to designate that they have a certain amount of long distance minutes per month, then that's when you would have an account level package. So that way it applies that limit of minutes of use for long distance to the whole entire account rather than to each individual line.
Cool.
All right. Once you've entered all those details, those are the details for the SIP trunk itself. Now you're ready to designate the phone lines on that SIP trunk, so you'll go to Next. And then this is where you're going to select what those SIP trunk members are. So you have the LNP option of yes or no. So for your office line, that would be yes. And then you would type in that phone number over here in this LNP number field, and then put in these LNP details down here.
LNP refers to?
I'm sorry, to the porting.
Oh.
So your office lines are coming into us from AT&T, so that would be considered a port. So they would be LNP yes in this case. If you leave LNP at no, then you have inventory available to you. So you would pick from this section the numbers that you want to add. And then you can indicate.
And those are all like DID numbers that can go on any line, any call path on the trunk.
Correct.
All right.
All All right, and then for directory, you just indicate yes or no. If they're going to have any type of listing, we're just going to leave it at no for today. And then you would select a package. So previously we selected a package for the SIP trunk itself, so that would contain the rates for the SIP trunk. Here you're picking a package for the lines themselves. So this is what would contain any type of billing information or billing charges associated per line for your end user, if any. And then here you would have your caller ID name. That pulls over from the name that was entered on the account. I created this as SIP Trunk Training, so you could come in and make changes if necessary to these caller ID names. And then you select a due date for the date of installation. Because we're pulling numbers from inventory, we can choose today's date as the due date. If it in the case of your office lines, since those are a port, it's going to require you to pick a due date very far out. Now we selected that to be for I believe November 13th, so that would be the due date selected when those are entered into Crossoft. But today we're going to choose the 11th. All right, so now we've selected these are the members that we want to add to our SIP trunk, but they haven't actually been added yet. So you've moved over those members, and then you'll select this add option. Then it makes sure that you're okay. There we go. And then from there it lists it out along with the package, any L&P information or directory information along with the due dates, giving you a chance to kind of review that. And then if you see that you've moved a number over that you didn't actually want, you can select this red X for delete and remove that as the SIP member. And then choose your primary extension. So this is the number basically that the SIP trunk is going to be built off of. It will be a line that can be assigned on that SIP trunk to make inbound and outbound calls, but from a switch perspective, there has to be this primary extension for the SIP trunk to be built on the meta switch. That's typically the main number on an account. And then we'll select Submit to submit the SIP trunk provisioning and the provisioning of the phone lines. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So right now what the system is doing is it's taking all of those details that we entered when we filled out all of the fields for the SIP trunk. It's taking that information and it's reaching out to the meta switch and it's building the trunk itself. Then it's taking the information from these SIP members and it's provisioning each one of those phone lines and building them on the switch on that SIP trunk, assigning the settings and the features that we indicated. Now, traditionally, you don't really, at least from a cross-off perspective, you don't add features to SIP trunk lines. I've only ever seen call waiting and caller ID added because for the most part, all of those additional features come out of that PBX or piece of equipment. All right, so it says SIP trunk details saved successfully. So now I'm going to select my account number in this quick info box. And you'll see that our lines have changed from 0 to active. When we go to voice, we now have all of our SIP trunk lines. One thing that the system does is it does give these icons for the different phone lines and there is color coding. You can also hover over it and it lets you know that it is a trunk member. But if you see this green little phone icon right here, then it's a SIP trunk line. And then we have L1 trunk member, which is basically level 1 trunk member, and then level 2 trunk member. The level 2 trunk member is when you've indicated that you are delivering that SIP trunk or you're transferring that SIP trunk over to a PRI to the end user. So that way at a quick glance you can tell, oh, okay, this is a SIP versus this is a PRI. And then, if you need to look at any details for the SIP trunk itself, you go to that same menu, so you've expanded group services, select SIP trunk, Here's your trunk. Now, if you have multiple trunks, they'll be listed out here in a table. Even if, say, you disconnect this trunk and another one is added at a later date, then you'll still see this information in the table for historical purposes. But if you need to make a change, like reset that password or increase the number of talk paths, you select this edit option, and it takes you right inside the zip trunk that we keyed. So if you need to change that 23, let's say we just want to go ahead and up it to 50, then you select that. Next. It is going to kind of take you in here for the lines in case you need to make any changes there, but we don't. So we'll select submit, and then it'll go ahead and apply that update of the increase in talk paths at the switch level. So there's our number of ports. They've been increased to 50. Okay. Now, are there any questions throughout the process, or do you think there might be any scenarios that you might have a question about? What if the customer wants this, or anything like that?
No, not really. It's pretty straightforward. Is the dial plan always 4, dial plan link?
Generally, that to allow 4-digit dialing.
Okay. We're good.
Okay. All right. Well, if you think of any other questions, once you're looking at the recording, once we get it sent over to you, and if you're reviewing it and you have any questions or anything comes up, then feel free to give Olivia or myself a call, and we're happy to help.
One question I do have: if you're picking PRI, sometimes there are signaling requirements by the PBX.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you do that?
Now, if in that case, see, and that's where things get tricky, because from our perspective, we're always going to be delivering a SIP trunk to you.
So in the we're converting the SIP trunk to a PRI inside the 908E. Is that right?
Correct. So if any signaling,
so it's it's the 908E that's actually doing the signaling then.
Yes.
All right, I got it.
But I will say, if you have a customer who is looking for a SIP trunk, and maybe they're asking for some things or some settings that you're not familiar with or new to you, or just you want to test it, just let us know. We can work with you to get a test trunk and run it through the gamut and make sure that everything's going to work the way you want it to work on the equipment you want it to work on and so forth before you get on site.
Okay.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're very welcome. As soon as the recording gets done converting and everything, we'll get it on over to you, and then you can share it internally if you need to, for anybody else that needs any type of training for SIP trunks.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Amanda.
You're welcome, guys. You have a wonderful day.
You too. God bless you, sweetie.
All right. Bye.
Bye.